had to discover a language. How do you discover a language? You have to name things, you have to find words. He went around and saw Corundum. Actually, it's called Kuruvinda because it comes from a place called Kuruvinda, and that became Corundum later. Similarly, Vaiduria comes from beryl. Beryl is actually Vaiduria. So you can see he gave the original names for many minerals. We are ahead of the world in recognizing minerals and giving them names. And Kautilya's Arthashastra plays an important role. We normally think of it as a document for economic prosperity and so on. It is more than that. 400 years, 2,400 years ago, he talked about mines, metals, gems and jewelry. These Indian treatises predate Theophrastus of Greece, their Lapidus. The Lapidus means stones in 300 BCE. So all this now is well known, but need to be established on a firm footing. I will make an appeal to Bharatiya Vigyan Sammelan to make sure a set of books are published, which will put it by a set of scholars. There must be a panel to look at all those things, and that is done. The Diamond Sutra of Gautama Buddha, again, Buddha talked about the Diamond Sutra, but he knew material science in a way, just the diamond can cut other diamond. We should be able to cut out our attraction to ourselves. So you can see our understanding of material science goes back a long way to the time of Buddha. The dawn of the Stone Age is very important. I must refer here to Shanti Papu, who had done work at the place called Athirambakam. By looking at the stones that are found there, and she could establish that they are actually tools. How do you make tools? Man is called a tool-making animal. It's very important to be able to put one stone against another and make sure that you're able to produce sharp edges. That is the cognition. Very important. And diamond is very important. This country was the sole source for diamond till about 1600. And some of them are well known, Hope and Kohinoor. But unfortunately, many of these diamonds were taken away. We are hoping to get some of them back. But you can see one of the most important materials, gold, diamond, we are masters of that. We are working on a project called History of India in 100 Objects. This of course follows what the British people have done, but especially the British Museum. But we want to highlight the important developments that have come. The National Museum we have, but several of our objects are museums in USA, Europe and Australia, and 50 monuments have been identified by TMS. The iron pillar has been given the ASM landmark. The zinc extraction at Zawar has been given the ASM landmark. And we now have geotag. The mirrors made in Aranmula are called Aranmula mirrors. You cannot make them elsewhere. I have given only some examples here, but these are fantastic examples which no other country can match. The bronze icons, the wood steel, the Delhi iron pillar, the bronze mirrors, and zinc and bidri ware. Cyril Stanley Smith is the father of both nuclear and archaeometallurgy. He laid out what I would call for the traditional science with modern scientific insights. He said you can study the objects that are available from earlier times, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, even a meteorite which has come millions of years ago. You can scientifically study their composition or microstructure, and that way you can know the records. Such records are in a universal language. They are far from the distortion that inevitably accompanies passage through humanity. Though such as talks, I can communicate with the dozens of craftsmen, including a Luristan silversmith, a bronze founder of the Shang dynasty, ancient Greek goldsmith, a 13th century Japanese goldsmith, and I understood them, as he jokingly says, far better than he can understand his English-speaking colleagues. It's like a Rosetta Stone, because we have a microstructure for which you can find. And I must say, digress a little bit here, we won political independence 70 years ago. It took us quite some time to win technological independence. Thanks to the technology denial regimes of various countries, we are able to do that. That's what we see in the exhibition everywhere. Whether space or defense and so on, we are able to. Slowly, as the country grew richer, we have got economic independence. The most difficult independence to win is the cultural independence. That's a struggle that we are facing now. Because thanks to 1 minute by Macaulay, who dismissed all Indian knowledge as can be contained in one book and said English should be imposed. We are still in the throes of this. We have to come out of that. I'm glad to see, one can see in today's India, this historical turning point where a large number of changes are taking place. we can recognize that. So cultural independence is the most difficult. It's almost like your skin. You have grown with that. How do you now change your mind to think differently? I'm sure as more material becomes available, thanks partly to the efforts of Bharati Vigyan Sammelan, INSA, Indian National Academy of Engineering, so many agencies are doing that. We'll be able to bring together an authoritative, comprehensive effort that has been done. Now, we have sacred, sensuous and tragic objects. Technology is often produces art. Technology precedes science. This is not often recognized. We often think you have to do science and then do technology. No, technology usually goes ahead of science. And this is where we come partly to the lectures that we are having here, religions, myths and magic potions. How do you separate them out? And experiments must be guided by intuition, worldview and chance. The Indian materials heritage, I've already said a few words. The dancing girl of Mohenjo-daro, you can see her there, 2500 BC, that is 4500 years ago. One of the earliest objects where processing was done. Wood, steel, I'll spend some time on this. The Delhi iron pillar, zinc extraction, Chola bronze icons, Kerala bronze mirrors. This is a fantastic set of achievements by our forefathers and ancestors. Now this is well understood thanks to efforts in the last 30, 40 years. Now, we have to make metals, we have to use a furnace. The bronze is easily melted because it melts around 1100 degrees centigrade because we melt copper with tin. Copper itself melts at a higher temperature. By adding tin, we are able to bring down the temperature. Cast iron is also not very difficult. It melts at 1150 degrees centigrade because we put a lot of carbon. For reasons that are not very clear to me, India has not made much headway in cast iron. The Chinese are well known for their cast iron. Under the ancient furnace, it could reach 1200 degrees centigrade, but for melting iron, you require 1537 degrees centigrade. It was beyond the capability of many of the ancient civilizations. That is where India comes in. Now, Indian literary sources are there. I already mentioned to Kautilya Arthasastra, Silappadigaram, Rasa Ratnavara text, and Ratnasastra text, and we can see we are ahead of the Western traditions. But this must be fully established and accepted by the whole world. Coinage metals are important, copper, silver, gold. We can learn a lot by looking at the metals because usually they stay. Civilization don't melt them. So by looking at the ancient coins, we can study what type of techniques are used, what they mastered at that time. This is very important. Zinc extraction, retorts of Zawar, Rajasthan. Zinc boils very close to its melting point. So when you extract zinc, when it is molten, it evaporates. So you can see we were able to make furnaces in this form here, shown here, inverted brinjal kind of thing. So this is the innovation by our traditional people, how zinc can be collected together and how it was made, and those are the zinc retards. This is recognized now as a major landmark by the American Society for Materials and must be very proud of it. As I shall say later, this technique was copied by the British when they were over us, and William Champion is given the credit for discovering the zinc process. Zinc, India and China, you can see here, zinc smelting began in China in the period 1200 to 1500 AD. But the most important thing is, it was called Tuttanag. We call it in the Indian language as Tuttanagam, very well known, and that is described here. These facts indicate that zinc was smelted about 3 centuries earlier in India, and then in China, and these were later transmitted from China to other countries. But William Champion took a patent. See, this is one of the things. And even today, even after this all become known, books still try to portray William Champion as the discoverer of the zinc extraction process. But I'm sure in course of time, this will get changed. I come to the most favorite object of all, the dancing girl. I showed her earlier, Indus Valley civilization, 4500 BC. It's one thing to invent a material. To invent a processing technique, this is done by what's called the lost wax process. This dancing girl found in Mohenjo-daro now is the National Museum in New Delhi. Excavated earliest bronze, 10.8 centimeters long, sculpted using the lost wax method called Seer Purju. You can see this beautiful art coming together with science and metallurgy. A vivid impression of the young girl with one hand on the hip in a half-impudent gesture, and her legs slightly ajar, so that she wants to treat music with her legs and feet. But please note that this account was written not by an Indian, though it is an Indian material, by John Marshall, excavator at Mohenjo-daro. Because archaeology came into the fore and the British took interest, we must give them credit for that. But the problem is that the statements are all ascribed to them. We must be able to write about this wonderful dancing girl and the continuing traditions in India. And fortunately for us, Mr. Baldev Raj, C.V. Sundaram and others took interest on this history of conservation of Indian heritage and Where the Gods Come Alive, a book which describes all the wonderful bronze icons. These are some of the most beautiful things that the world has produced. Rodin has described them. There is nothing like this. But one of the disadvantages of these books being produced is the Western world came to know about the value of this. So many of the idols were stolen from our temples. Now there is a great effort to get them back. But I want to here pay a tribute to S. Paramasivan. He wrote some of the earliest papers using scientific techniques for identifying this. So now we have history of conservation of Indian metallurgy and materials heritage, materials conservation. So a new turn has come in the last 20, 30 years. This is nothing to do with India, but I still like to think it's influenced by India. This is the bronze Buddha in Todaiji in Nara, in Kyoto, temple in Nara. You may wonder why I am introducing this. When the Chinese came to India, they learnt about Buddhism. It was at that time, instead of making large idols, Indian craftsmen made small idols for carrying in festivals and so on. The Chinese monks carried these idols back. And then in China, they built temples where they put those idols. But Japanese and Koreans came into contact with the Chinese via what's happening in China and decided to convert to Buddhism and build Buddhist temples. And being Japanese, they want to build the largest Buddhist temple. This was done in Nara in the year 752 AD and it's been restored now. The largest Buddhist idol, but what you must know is quite interesting. Though the Japanese took help from the Chinese in terms of composition, how to make it, from the Koreans, they wanted a Buddhist priest to come all the way from India for the opening of the ice ceremony. It shows how Indian influence was so widespread that eye had to be opened to invoke, if you like, Buddha into that bronze statue. And this is written in great detail. We have wonderful pictures of all that. The brush itself is so large. You can well imagine huge figures floating above and so on. All this is available. And this is just an influence of a thought from India which has traveled through all these countries. And Indian craftsmen in 20th century, these traditions continue. It's an important point I want to emphasize about India. Unlike other countries, Michael Wood has talked about it. In many places, the old traditions have vanished, but India is still home to all this. You can see the craftsmen making it the same way as might have done centuries ago. Copper tin, because the alloy is, bronze is an alloy of copper and tin. Because of the bronze which went from India to these places, they want to analyze that. So this is the first phase diagram of copper tin. Let us not worry too much about the details of the phase diagram. It tells you where the various phases occur, what is the composition required, what is the melting point. So the whole science, if you like, of physical metallurgy comes into being as the Westerners study this. And this is iron making by the Agarias, the tribal people. Even today in Chhattisgarh and other places, this tradition continues. Let me spend a few minutes on the Delhi iron pillar. Before we go to that, I want to tell you about the tale of two pillars: transition in empires, materials, manufacturing, epigraphy, religion, location, and capital. This is the Mauryan capital, made of stone. The solid shaft of polished sandstone is very high, 22 feet in the air. It weighs about 32 tons, 50 tons, making a remarkable feat of engineering. This is during the Gupta Empire. We've already come to the iron pillar. So we changed from stone, if you like, to iron. And the famous Ashoka, lion capital of Ashoka, preserved at Sarnath, was originally erected around 250 BC atop the Ashoka pillar at Sarnath. Of course, Professor Lele and myself have gone there many times to look at it. Almost all the pillars secured their sandstone from the Chinnar quarry close to Varanasi. But at that time I was in Benares, I was not aware of this history as it were. We used to go there for picnics, if you remember right, so enjoy that. So you can see one place produced the best sandstone possible for the whole of India. And here is the script, the Delhi Iron Pillar. The inscription is very important. If you understand this, you can understand the history. But we had to rely on the Brahmi script. But the Brahmi script was forgotten by us. Ashoka was forgotten by us. I hope this does not happen again, thanks to the efforts that are currently underway. It's the earliest post-Indus corpus of text, the ancestor of all South Asian writing. So we gave rise to the whole of South Asian writing. It has been used to write a variety of languages, including Sanskrit and Prakrit. But unfortunately, we couldn't read it until James Prinsep came from UK. He was a mint master at Varanasi. He settled down in Benares